Can anyone hear me? All right, excellent.
Hey, Lindsay, how are you?
Hello.
All right, nice. I'm Louis Masensi. I'm one of the co-founders for the event. Actually just standing in for a couple of minutes. Cree's just wrapping up another panel. She should be here shortly. Thank you so much for coming. I'm very, very excited about this panel. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Looking forward to talking about compliance and some cannabis industry opportunities. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for doing all the work to put this on. This is great.
for sure. Thank you for being here. I feel like there's a lot to learn. And also, Debbie told us about your internship program, which is awesome. Yeah, so we'd love to talk about that, So everybody else that's here, welcome. We're going to have our compliance panel start in just a couple of minutes. For now, just quick reminder, which I'm sure you've heard me say before, if you're looking to network with folks, there's that networking area to the right of us if you're on a computer, and Expo is where the jobs can be found. And of course, you can chat with us through the chat functionality. Okay. Hey, Stephen. I see that you spoke with Debbie earlier. Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think our internship program could be a great place to start.
Yeah, Debbie was awesome, of course. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
always.
As always, yeah, it was a pleasure. Yeah. So I think Free should be here in a moment. I think Chad, are you with us? I believe Chad is our second panelist, and I believe he might be here already. Donavia, I see you. Hey, how are you?
Hi, is my audio working?
It sure is.
Okay, yay.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so we're just waiting for Chad. I see you there. If you can hop on whenever you're ready. Cree should be here in another minute, and we can get going on this panel as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Lindsay, unrelated to the topic we're discussing, I really like your background. I just think it looks really ethereal and like nice.
Thank you. Yeah, just a shade. I wasn't sure how to do the virtual backgrounds and hop in. So I was like, well.
Yeah, well, there's no appropriate time to call that out. I just want to go.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Chad.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Chad, we made it with the bottom of the ninth. I think that's, I don't do baseball. I think that's the reference though. But anyways, hey guys, thank you so much for joining. Hey everyone in the audience here. We are going to start with our last panel of the day, the compliance panel. Super excited about this panel because arguably compliance is one of the, if not the most important aspect of the cannabis industry. Like I always tell folks when they reach out to me about how to get started, learn the regulations, learn the policies, be compliant, and we will jump into all of this in a little bit, but super, super important. So starting off with one more intro, I'm sure you guys, again, are tired of seeing my face, but I'm Cree Robinson. I'm one of the co-founders of touCanna, which is one of the organizers of this event. We are a software company for dispensaries. We help them to streamline all of their operations. Super excited to be here with my amazing panelists here. And so I want to start off with just some quick intros. I would love for you guys to tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do. And let's go ahead and start off with Ms. Donavia.
Yeah, so I'm Donavia Moget. I have been in the cannabis industry for years. I wear a lot of hats. I work by day in compliance in the legal department. I'm also this corporate impact strategist, so I oversee all the programming around how we impact communities, our employees. I started a nonprofit 3 years ago. It's called the Black and Brown Cannabis Guild. Through that work, I started years ago doing expungement organizing, learning laws, statutes around that, then lobbying for the law to change. Since Clean Slate, my organization has grown to be one of the largest expungement event organizers in Michigan. And we've also started a pipeline to employment to get people who were ineligible for expungement jobs in the cannabis industry. And my whole life is this, reading the rules and finding ways to help people. So I'm happy to be on this panel. Thanks for inviting me, Cree.
I love it. Danavia, as you can hear and see, she is doing so many things in the industry that, again, are driving the industry forward. Expungement fairs, that is something that we have not touched on a ton in this career fair, but the social equity aspect of this industry is so important. And we need people who are doing grassroots work like Danavia and her organizations to drive that forward. So thank you so much, Danavia, for that intro. And Lindsay, let's get an intro from you, who you are, what you do, and where you are.
All right. Yes, I'm Lindsay Kincaid. I am the Chief Compliance Officer with Rocky Mountain Cannabis Consulting. I think some of you heard from my coworker, Debbie Spranza, earlier today. Yes, we are in Denver, most of us. Yeah, and basically, as Chief Compliance Officer, I am just monitoring rules and regulations across the country and communicating that to my team, updating our source of truth documentation that kind of serves as the backbone for everything that we do for our clients. And yes, and then I get to do fun things like this. And we did a business resource work group with the MRA. And yes, we're definitely offering resources for social equity applicants every chance we get. So yep, that's basically it. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And I would love to point out that RMCC is women owned and operated, which I think is very important. We definitely need more women, veterans, and minorities in this cannabis industry. So thank you for setting an example. Everyone knows who RMCC is. Everyone is impressed with the work that you guys are doing. So please keep it up.
Thank you.
Yes. And last but not least, Chad. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where you are.
Absolutely. So I'm Chad DeLauder, and I work for Loom Cannabis. So I run the corporate loss prevention and safety efforts for the entire company out of the state of Michigan. Our corporate office is based out of Troy, Michigan. So for those of you that are familiar with the Michigan area, it's basically to keep this company and keep this industry honest and moving forward. So I handle all aspects of our business, from operations to safety, to investigations, to MRA compliance. Just like I heard a few minutes ago, people wearing different hats. It seems like when I walked in with the company, I was handed several different hats. And but I can tell you, I have learned more about this product and this industry in the year and a half that I've been in this industry than I could have ever learned prior to my experience. And it's been a long but fun-filled ride.
Awesome. And Chad, I'm wondering if your back hurts from carrying all of that responsibility. Loom is corny joke for the day, I'm done. But Loom is a huge organization across Michigan. And like I said, compliance is one of the, if not the most important aspect of the cannabis industry. And the work that Chad does is extremely important. We will dive into that a little bit more in terms of the specifics of what he does, but that is a huge responsibility, especially for an organization that is the size of Loom. So thank you, Chad, for being here.
Happy to be here.
All right. And so, Chad, since we ended with you, I will pose the first question to you. So a lot of folks who reach out to me about getting into the cannabis industry don't have a lot of prior experience, or they don't necessarily know where to start. So can you give me an example of a typical career path to get to your current role? Or maybe you can speak to the steps that you took in particular to get to where you are at Loom.
Sure. No, that's a great question. So my career path started well over 20 years ago as a criminal justice major from the University of Michigan, Flint. I needed work experience in related to that venture and going in that direction in my life. So I got into retail loss prevention, and I've been in several entities. I've been in soft lines, I've been in grocery, I've been in hard lines and home improvement. And so all the years of experience brought me to where I am today has helped me better understand what I need to do, whether I'm selling t-shirts, whether I'm selling peanut butter and bananas, or whether I'm selling a THC product. Keeping those focuses on what I've done the last 20 years, it's helped me be very successful at Loom. And so to answer your question, for someone to want to get into what I'm doing today, there's a lot of companies out there that are looking for hardworking young people that would love to learn the work of loss prevention and safety. And it's a very rewarding career. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of ways to branch out into different venues in loss prevention. And I've been very fortunate to lead to where I am today. Very fortunate to work for Loom Cannabis as well.
I love that. And again, it's something I've been saying all day about taking the skills that you have and the experience that you have and transferring it to the cannabis industry. You don't have to do anything different in a lot of cases.
No, you don't.
You know, and build what you can in the cannabis industry. So thank you for that, Chad. And the next question I'd like to pose to Danavia. So with that being said, you do a lot. So you work with Flourish, you have your own nonprofit, you do all these expungency fairs. So how does one kind of get those skills to do all of those different things? How does one get the soft skills to build a career in compliance?
Yeah, so I would say I would say this is so appealing to the natural autodidact, right? Since I was a child, I was someone who was a self-learner, right? I was always studying things. I came from a big family, and I was the nerd who was always just spouting random facts. My brother would just be like, "Dork, shut up." And I'm like, "Well, did you know that the arachnid," like, it's just, I didn't know where it came from, but I loved knowledge, right, and information. In compliance, when it comes to the soft skills, right, there are some industries where you learn it, you get the degree in it, and you do it forever, right? Compliance is not that space, especially in cannabis. The regulatory climate in Michigan is so volatile that unless you have that willingness to be someone who is constantly learning, studying, and constantly renewing that knowledge and studying again, you may feel like this industry or this particular role is overwhelming. But what I found is, my parents joke that I've had a million careers because I have so many fascinations, right? I think, like Chad, I feel like I'm super lucky to be in this industry because the road here was pretty unique. All my friends who saw me graduating were like, "Oh, she's going to go off to be an engineer. She taught herself how to program, got a presidential scholarship to Michigan Tech, and is moving to the UP next week." And then I got there, was the only African-American female in my entire incoming class of thousands, and realized, okay, culture shock. I'm from a small Black community, Benton Harbor, and the UP doesn't look like my community, and it's very hard here. And I started to learn things about myself, and so I took the skills that were natural to me, right? I tell people I don't have to be an engineer, but I have to think like an engineer every single day. I look at all the variables, I stack regulations on top of regulations, and I find out how we adhere to all of them. So like when it pertains to Flourish, right? We think about the fact that we, like Loom, operate in multiple locations. So when we think about compliance, like how to be a compliant operator, the only real difference between the Black market or the unregulated industry and the one that we have today that we call legal is really the rules and money. And so without compliance, you typically do think you know the cannabis industry, but that is a very wide gap to fill, right? What you can and cannot do and where you learn that information. In cannabis, especially in a younger market like Michigan, it's very fluid, right? Sometimes you'll call the state for an answer and they'll say, "We don't have that answer yet." Or "This is from this rule set, not from that rule set. We haven't combined the rule set. What does your local rule set say? And if you're in two local communities, what is their rule?" You know what I mean? And so that is compliance. And so the skills to sustain in this industry start from having this root hunger to stay on top of the most relevant information for your industry and for your operations. So that's transparently what I tell folks.
And I have so much, and thank God for people like yourself. I have so much empathy for operators because cannabis regulations change faster than a woman in fashion's wardrobe. You know what I'm saying? Like they change. I'm just really killing it with the corny jokes today. But I don't
laugh. So like, I feel like we're here.
Yeah, so it's absolutely necessary. The regulations change so quickly, so you have to stay on top of them. Compliance is not something where you can say, like Nadia said, okay, I've read the book, I'm good, and I can move on. That is not the case. Coming from a tech perspective, and Lindsay, I'm coming for you for this question. Coming from a tech perspective, so we have to work with an organization called Metric, which is a seed to sale, what we call seed to sale tracking. They're responsible for managing or tracking where plants are coming from and where they're going. And we've reached out to them and we've had questions about our integrations and things. And we get the most blanket questions sometimes. And we're like, what are we supposed to do with this? Like, how are we supposed to use this? And so in that case, we would work with folks like Lindsay and her team to kind of understand and make sense of some of those blanket answers and some of those regulations from a tech perspective. And so, Lindsay, I wanted to ask you, because you have an interesting role in which you work with operators and you work with tech companies who are trying to get into the industry. So with that being said, can you tell me a little bit about what a typical day in your role looks like?
Yes, a typical day in my role. What I love about my job is that no day is the same. I get to wear a lot of hats and I consider it a privilege. I know we've all talked about just filling a lot of roles. But yes, so I would say primarily my capacity is to be that curious I was talking about, like to be that person who's willing to pick up the phone and call the MRA and say, I am so confused. What does this mean? So, really opening up those lines of communication with regulators is so important. And I'll say the MRA is a joy to work with as opposed to some other regulatory bodies. Like they will really, try and sort it out with you and get you the information you need. But yes, so that is a huge part of my day, is just living in the rules and regulations, monitoring for those changes. I am signed up for just about every single newsletter, piece of news, just anything you can think of. If I go to every regulatory body's website and I sign up for their newsletters and I check their websites all the time, looking for those changes that maybe they didn't send out a newsletter for. And then so one of our resources that's pretty helpful for our tech partners is our regulatory matrices. So they're basically, it's every single rule and regulation, what kind of license type it applies to. It has everyday language, and then it's all broken up by like record retention requirements, application requirements, like purchase limits and things like that. So they have a quick reference just to hop in there while they're building their software and know the parameters and how they differ state by state. So,
and I've seen this, guys, they are very thorough, very in-depth. And I was just going to ask you, Lindsay, and any of you can jump into this question, actually, where do you even start? So if I today said, I want to become a compliance officer at my local dispensary, but I need to learn the regulations first, where do I start? And I really love that you mentioned newsletters, because I was thinking podcasts and books, but I think newsletters are a great resource. And I see Janavi shaking her head there.
Absolutely.
Newsletters are a great resource, it sounds like. Chad, I'm going to direct that to you. What insight do you have to weigh in on that?
Well, when it comes to compliance, honestly, what I have learned through the MRA is they are more than happy to even come to your store, come to your business and work with you face to face. I've even had MRA agents come in and do mock audits leading into an actual formal audit and inspection, just so they can make sure and help you understand the importance of your work related to their work. So the best thing is communication with the MRA. Those guys, they're learning as we learn. That's probably one thing I had to come to terms with without having to rely on them 24/7 is the open dialogue with them going back and forth. As they continue to see how we run our business, they will then revamp their policies and procedures with how we run our business to make sure that their compliance laws match the actual needs of cannabis. It's one thing to write a policy. It's another thing to go out in the field and see how that policy affects business. So then when you get out in the field, you realize, oh, I got to revamp this policy. Those guys are open to those types of ideas and ways to make things better. So that's probably the best advice I can give, is just open line of communication with the MRA.
And I would say, Cree, one of the best resources is also, because like Lindsay said, I struggle to follow and learn as much the podcast and the auditory conversations. But when someone gives me something that I can print, I will literally just go through and I'll really find context for it. And it's better, in my opinion, because sometimes you have to tackle compliance. There's first understanding like what the rule is, and then there's the interpretation of the rule. To learn the interpretation of the rule, you need relationships and a willingness to be proactive and have conversations with people. But to know what the rule is first, to have intelligent questions for that conversation, you really need to be willing to go to those websites. And like you said, if I know I want to be the compliance manager for this local dispensary, right? And I have all the soft skills necessary, and I just need to start getting familiar with the rule sets, I would go figure out what that business is doing, right? Is it medical? Is it adult use? Is it both? Is it just adult use? Then I'm just going to need to start with the rules for a retail arm. If they also want to have a consumption lounge attached, where are the rules for the consumption lounge? If they also throw events, where are the rules for event permits, right? I would start with what is that business trying to do, and what are the laws for those operations? And if you know those operations, you're not just grasping for laws in cannabis, you're literally going piece by piece through how that business expects to remain compliant. And I think is really.
That's interesting, Zanavia, because I think I'm the same way. I love a good podcast, but I need something that I can read and highlight and really dissect. And it sounds like this is something, that method of learning might be beneficial in this particular industry. So with that being said, I'd love to hear from all of you as well, but I want to start off with Lindsay here. Would you say that businesses are typically more proactive or reactive when it comes to compliance?
Well, I mean, I think the good ones, the businesses that are going to be able to leave that business to their families or, you know, sell that business down the road, these are the people who are proactive. And I mean, if you try and take a reactive approach, like I'm not going to fix this until a regulator tells me to fix it. Now you're getting into a risky situation with fines. You could even lose your license, lose your business. So I think if you want your business to thrive in this industry, you need to be constantly staying on top of the rules and regulations. And not only, like Danavia was saying, what does that rule say, but what does that mean in my operation? What does that look like? And, you know, don't be afraid to pick up the phone. So I think some businesses kind of think, oh, I don't want to self-report or get myself in trouble. It's like, no, the MRA is very much willing to help you through this process as we all figure this out together. So
nice. Yeah, it's amazing sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
When it comes to municipal compliance, especially these, and they're looking for operators who have focus in compliance, active and help. Because their own enforcement. And I didn't when I was getting into compliance, this, you know, having a relationship both with your state, but then what does your relationship look like with your local, when they know, you know, what to expect of the industry, right? This, you know, has a budget, a robust budget and team that study this. A lot of these smaller communities, townships, villages, cities, they're looking at the industry and said, okay, we opt in, we don't really know what that means. And short of just copy and paste, doing compliance people and which operators are willing to walk hand in hand with us to flesh out what compliance looks like. I've learned that the best are about, you know, building those relationships and educating. I think it's really important.
Relationship management is so key to this industry. And I mean, with any industry, right? But what you said, I think, is so powerful. Having those relationships, and by building those relationships, you know who's going to be willing to invest the time from the MRA or from whatever organization to walk you through what those rules and regulations are. Because that could be the difference between having a flourishing, pun intended, successful cannabis business or one that is shut down because you're not being compliant, right? So that is extremely important. So thank you, Danavia, for that insight there. So, Denavia, I want to stay with you for a second in this question, and then Chad, I'd like you to answer this next. What do people get wrong about your role, your role in compliance at Flourish? I think we're having a bit of connection issues. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I can hear you fine.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Denavia, we will start off with Chad for that question, and then we will circle back to you.
So what do folks misunderstand about my role? Is that what your question is?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so with my question in general, with my title in general, my role and responsibilities with Loom, there's a lot of misconception that my job simply focuses just on security and safety. And so there is much more to my job outside of just managing the physical security of the company, if you will. And so with compliance, I also have to help them manage the operations of the business. You know, coming from an operational background, I worked for Meijer. And believe it or not, our highest loss item at Meijer wasn't, you know, flat screens, it wasn't vacuums, it wasn't electronics, it was fresh. It was fresh product. The apples, the oranges, the deli, the bakery, the meat, the stuff that had shelf life to it. Well, guess what? We work in an industry now that our product also has shelf life. And so one thing that I spend a great deal of time on at Loom is the FIFO program, first in, first out, getting that product in, getting it out, getting it sold, instead of it expiring, going to waste, and creating loss for the company. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm focusing on waste at Loom. I'm focusing on managing that profit, managing that product so it doesn't sit around, collect dust, expires, because we have a lot of customers that love high quality product. And they know if something is sitting on the shelf that's been sitting there for too long. And so my job in loss prevention is to maximize those profits as well as maintaining the security and compliance. So that spends a big part of my time.
And so, yeah, that really touches on the bottom line of a lot of these operators, right? Like, how are you maximizing my profits? I think that's extremely important. And just someone told me a story one time. He was an operator. He had a cultivation facility, and he told me that he had a team of folks that he trusted. However, they locked him out of the cultivation facility and just stole pounds and pounds of product. Like, these are people that he trusted. They locked him out, and then they just went shopping, and then that was it. So the stories like that just really amazed me. And like I said, again, these are people that he trusted, that he had been working with. And so, yeah, a role like yours, Chad, is extremely important. And again, it touches on the bottom line of a lot of these operators. So thank you for answering that. And Denavia, it looks like we have you back. Would like to circle back to you. And then David, I see your question here. We'll get to you in just a second. But yeah, if you could tell us, Denavia, what do folks get wrong about your role in compliance?
I think, so there's two misperceptions of the work, right? There's the internal confusion around my role and then the external confusion around my role. I think sometimes internally it's like, oh, you're compliant, so you're legal, so you must only come in if something. And you know, that's not typically it. Sometimes I'm there to help figure out what SOP is going to help us maintain our compliance, especially during COVID. Right? What does our emergency response plan look like? And what does it look like to do this and to do that? What are other operators doing? My hand is in that work. And then I also think internally, you know, every time we that involve interfacing with the state or an enforcement agency, whether it's, you know, hiring policies, if we make promises in our application to hit this percentage of this type of workforce, and then we hire a bunch of recruiters who don't know anything about our application, I then have to come through and brief them and then revise their recruitment strategies until it looks like it will get us to compliance. And they're like, well, she's not HR. I'm like, yeah, but I'm compliance. And so I have to do that too. And so I think internally it's kind of like, you know, is it legal or like, what is this she's here to do? But because I know every word in our application and every word in the rules, everything from our voluntary commitments for each city to each this, I'm like, no, this isn't going to work, because we, in the end, if you think you're doing your job well, but you don't know specifically what we've promised to do as an operator, you may be doing a really great job at your job and still get us non-compliant. And so I have to revise and tweak the way things happen, even at other departments, whether it is HR or whether it is the retail team or whatever, you know what I mean? And then externally, I think people think compliance folks and cannabis are just like lawyers, right? Like our job is just to spend all day litigating things, and that's not real. We're actually, we're like the middle ground, which is we protect the integrity of the organization, and we lend a great deal of integrity to the industry. And so, yeah, I don't think people always get it right when I say legal compliance manager. Like I don't that in court, but yeah, that's sometimes what people get wrong, but it's okay. I think it's once people are in the industry, you realize how critical we are to the work, then nobody seems to be able to grow or sustain without us, but no one tends to think about us when they're in their accelerator trying to build out their dream and get the most amazing strain or product, And so we're kind of the missing piece, but also the most important.
100%. Like you guys are invaluable when it comes to this industry. And that's the thing too that scares me so much is a lot of folks don't mention compliance when they say my dream is to have 6 cultivation facilities across Antarctica. And I'm like, okay, but where are we talking about compliance? Have you worked with any consulting firms? You know the regulations, and like, oh no. So I'm like, well, so
that is the story of my life. Like literally, I met some folks recently and through the Black and Brown Cannabis Guild, and like, we've got a building, we're ready. This is our business plan. We had a architect do the build up, and I said, you didn't look at the zoning map? Like this location is within 1,000 feet of another that's illegal. And they're like, oh, we didn't know that was a rule. I'm like, that's totally a rule. Or I met with someone who was like, I have found the investors and I'm so excited. My business is about to pivot to start catering to cannabis. We're going to reduce this whole line of fruit this and infuse that. And I said, how are you going to pass homogeneity testing? Like, you have to infuse this. We didn't even think about that. We're not doing that. We didn't realize that was a part of the law. We just wanted to create new products in cannabis. And I'm like, well, do you realize that the reason why those products don't exist is because of the testing laws? Like testing laws go into how product development works. And if you don't know what the regulations are, you really can't decide where to get into the industry. And so I wish I could tell even aspiring cannapreneurs how important it is to be in touch with the regulations, because you can literally be pouring your heart and your passion into something that is completely legally not feasible. And I think a lot of folks just miss that part because they don't crack open their cannabis law Bible and start, pouring through the rules.
100%, and it's scary. And with that being said, before we wrap up here, Lindsay, I wanted to ask you, what would you say, because I'm sure you have some resistant clients who you work with and they're like, I can do the rest myself. What would you say to someone, an operator who maybe thinks that they don't need to learn the regulations, or even though they don't know them, they don't need to work with a consultant? What would you tell someone who had that mindset?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I would just say to somebody who feels like they don't need to be living in their regulations that you really need to be able to pivot, right? Because you're not going to get your application, you're not going to receive a license unless you can meet the rules and regulations. So rather than having your dreams crushed when you've already, gone down this road, you've got your space, you've got your business plan, and you're all ready to go ahead and get in those rules and regulations first, and then form your business around what you're able to do in the industry. And know that it differs state to state. So if you're a California operator, you're not just going to be able to jump into Michigan or Oklahoma with your same exact business structure. You're going to need to change. So yeah, I would just say stay flexible, be ready to pivot.
Yes, 100%. And we have to wrap up here, but I did want to get to a couple of questions from the audience. So first we have David. I think this was directed to Chad. Is FIFO, first in, first out, something that you teach all of your bud tendering and dispensary staff?
Absolutely. So I'm in the field a lot. I don't like to sit behind a desk. I'm a guy that loves to be out on the road. Denali, I spend a lot of time up in northern Michigan. We have stores all the way up in Iron Mountain and Negaunee and Sault Ste. Marie. So when I travel, I love to teach the bud tenders and the sales staff the importance of pushing through the product that needs to sell versus the stuff that's sitting on the shelf. Absolutely. That's a very passionate part of my job is the FIFO program.
Can you explain why that, just briefly here, Chad, can you explain why that's important?
Well, we pay for that product. That comes out of our bottom line. It doesn't just show up for free. So if we show up and that stuff is in our store and it's not getting maximized profit, it's going into the waste. And whatever goes in the waste is pure shrink, as we call it in retail loss prevention. And so with that, it's important for us to understand all the way from the ordering process, not just selling it, but are you ordering to the needs of your business? If you're over ordering and not meeting the needs of your customers, or if you're got too much sitting on your shelf, it all starts with how much you're ordering your product for your stores. And so that kind of is the step one of the process, is how you order it, how you stock it, how you rotate it, how you sell it. All of that plays a role in my job in loss prevention. Make sure that we're doing what's right for our community, for our business. We're not stocking too much product on our shelves. That way we don't overstock, and then got too much and then it gets thrown away. It's a very common practice in this industry if you don't pay attention to your inventory.
And Chad, you spoke to a very, and Denavia touched on it as well, a very analytical component to compliance and having this role in compliance. You have to be able to process things, analyze things in such a way where they make sense and where it's going to overall benefit the company. So thank you for touching on that. And then we have a question from Anthony, who says, why, or would you say having a JD help one stand out in the field of compliance? So anyone could jump in and take this if you feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, absolutely, because what you're saying there is I know how to read laws. I know how to read rules and regulations because they're not written in the way that a normal person would write something. So being able to read that language and not just, and make sense out of it is such an important skill.
Awesome. I would 100% agree. And I've connected with quite a few lawyers, Anthony, that are knowledgeable in compliance. And so I'm happy to connect you with them as well if you'd like to kind of pick their brains a bit. And then one more question, and Denavia, I would love for you to take this one. Do you think there will be a point when all regulations will become universal? And if so, how?
Yeah, I would just say this is the natural progression of the industry, right? It's not an if, but when, right? Every day you turn on the news, you see Amazon says they're going to be getting into cannabis, and this state is going to, and now this party is pushing for the cannabis isn't. I think the piece that prohibited all of these rules from being kind of consolidated in the beginning was controversy. But as controversy kind of melts away from the plan itself, you see the need for more regulation. I think where we are now isn't at like if one day there'll be universal or national rules for cannabis, but what the pace of that is going to look like and who gets to be the architect of that infrastructure, right? I think that's where we are right now. The war of which lobby corps gets to push for the rules and which states get to shift in which markets. And I think that's more realistic for cannabis, to just say that at some point we will have consolidated state rules. At some point we will have a federal set of rules. And at some point, I think universally, because we see so many of the big organizations like WHO, the United Nations, other countries that are all saying we're studying cannabis, we're preparing our cannabis research, those sectors are being developed. At some point, I think universally, yeah, cannabis will have some overall rules, regulations, and bodies that connect it all. But yes, it is very siloed right now, state by state, community by community, and market by market.
Very much so. And I think that's a part of what makes it tough for compliance experts, for operators, because you can have a set of rules and regulations in Michigan. The example that I always give is, for example, in Michigan, we can't call dispensaries. We have to call them provisioning centers. And then you can go to Oklahoma and that be a completely different scenario. So there's all this variation by state, sometimes even by municipality, and it can be very challenging to navigate. So
and that's why I would say bring your skills to cannabis, but still learn the industry. I've heard that in rooms a lot today. They're like, oh, what industry you're in, you can do it in cannabis. I say with the asterisks, you have to be willing to learn what's cannabis specific about your skill set. Because that was one of the first things I was like, I don't want to be the person who gets people in trouble, but we just hired a marketing person and they keep putting the word dispensary on things. They keep putting sale on things. They put the word free on something. And I'm like, oh my God, someone stop her. And so it was like a simple conversation around like, here are some of the laws around your job because you're so good at it, but can you just not get us in trouble? And so that's my asterisk around that.
That is such an important caveat. And I see some folks asking about marketing here, but yes, those are they seem like small things, but they can have monumental impacts. So yes.
They do. I mean, they can get you fined. They can get your license suspended. They can get your license revoked. I'm at the point now where sometimes I can look at a product and see which market it came from. It's like, oh, this product would be, I'm like, oh, this is from Chicago. This is Illinois. You can't do that in Michigan. Like, you brought this from wherever, because the rules are so specific around what even your package can look like and how you can market it. I'm like, oh, this isn't a regulated product. You can't make a claim like that. That's a health claim, illegal. Like, I do it so naturally now, because over the years, you just get so familiar with the don'ts, that you just, you kind of, that's all you see.
Yes, you have to. And that is such a great caveat. Yes, bring your skills to the cannabis industry, but learn the rules and regulations regardless of what you're doing, point blank, period. And yeah, Ryan, when Denavia said free, everyone did cringe. I tried to keep it hidden, but yeah, I cringed internally a little bit as well. So yeah, there are things that you don't want to do. Learn the rules and regulations, seek out help, seek out folks like Chad, Lindsay, and Denavia. They are consultants. Help them, allow them to consult you, to give you advice, to get you started. That's why they're here in the industry, to keep us compliant, to keep this industry going. And so with that, we will wrap up and head over to the social hour here. But before we leave, wanted to give you guys a chance to drop your contact info or let people know how we can get in contact with you. So Denavia, let's start with you. How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can email me. I can throw my email in the chat. Text and email is I tell my family, Google Calendar is my love language. So really, if any way that you get on my calendar is pretty much the best way to catch me in between BBCG and toddler mom and flourish job. So just write me and we'll set something up. I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, and I love being connected with Denavia on Instagram, because I'm so amazed by how active she is as a mom. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, she's so active as a mom, and I see the Legos and the breakfast in bed and all the things, but then she's this powerhouse in the cannabis industry. I love to watch it. It's really amazing, guys. So definitely check her out on Instagram and follow that journey of hers there. Lindsay, tell us how we can get in touch with you.
Yes, I will drop the details in the chat here, but the Rocky Mountain Cannabis Consulting website is rmcc.io. And yeah, the email is leadership@rmcc.io as well. So yeah, please reach out. Any interest in interning with us, or, we have a certification program if you're looking to kind of get that education to get those first steps into the industry. Yeah, we've got great resources for you. So I'll add that info.
And yes, guys, again, the resources at RMCC are so thorough. The certification program is honestly, in my opinion, one of the best in the industry. So if you are interested, or you know someone who is interested in that type of program, please reach out to them and they will get you covered. And Chad, again, last but not least, but tell us how we can get in contact with you.
Sure. I will leave my email address on here, my work address, and I'm already getting people like linking into me on LinkedIn. So from the call right now as we speak. So LinkedIn is also a great website to get a hold of me, but I will leave my contact information on the chat here.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Chad, for being here. Thank you so much. Again, guys, you're looking at the faces of some of the most important types of people in the industry. Hopefully you took some notes. Hopefully you got some good gems from everything that they said. Let's head over to the social hour. We will be wrapping up here in about an hour, but we do have some prizes that we will be giving away. Connect with the panels. I don't think I put my contact info here, but I can be reached at on LinkedIn at Cree Robinson, on Instagram at Cree.Robinson. I always like to make myself a resource for anyone who's interested in the industry. And yeah, just thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate you. Hopefully we can see you over in the social hour in just a little bit. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys. Talk to you soon.